everyone, welcome back to the Critic-Verse. Today we're going to be doing another breakdown and review for the latest episode of Bel-Air, Season 2, Episode 5, titled Excellence is Everywhere. Now, before we get to the breakdown, like, comment, and subscribe as we start to build a community here in the Critic-Verse, and I hope you join me as I do further videos. Now, let's get to the breakdown. Will gets his first taste of what it's like to be a part of Zenith hype, as his first day of training is rough and intense to the point where he throws up. Then some of the guys start to clown him that he's just a rich Bel-Air brat, and that he's soft. Will tries to push back, but his performance today can't back up his words, and they say he won't make it. Next, Jeffrey helps Aunt Viv bring artwork into her studio as she's planning the layout of her art show to present to Janice from the Lehman Foundation. Aunt Viv says her push for undiscovered artists is not being received well, and Jeffrey advises her that they need her more than she needs them. Viv brings up Phil's family reunion, which will be their responsibility this year, and Jeffrey says he's already stocked up on the alcohol. For her, not for them. To which she asks how's it going between him and Phil. But she states in general, but mainly to them, which Jeffrey says that the two of them are finding their way once again. Viv says with everything going on at the firm, Jeffrey is the only one that Phil trusts the most right now. Next, Will is complaining to Jackie about those guys clowning him, calling him soft, grumbling that they don't know him, to which Jackie fires back that he doesn't know them either. One of them, Hassan, takes 3 buses to get there and worked out every day before school for a year, and now he's starting. The other one, Brian, used to live in his car before Doc found him, and now college coasters are beating down his door. Their hunger is what gives them an edge. She advises Will that he needs to find his edge. Then Doc tells Will the first date is always rough, gives him a book that he gives to all the players, and tells him that he has to put in the time. But Will assures that he's not scared of hard work. Doc says to bring his swim trunks because they're starting with 50 laps next week. And West Philly Will still can't swim, to which Jackie does clown him about. Ashley comes downstairs for breakfast, and Phil gives her a letter from Miss Hughes, who got a couple of offers for a new job in Chicago close to her family. Ashley is saddened by Miss Hughes going back home, but Phil says because of her, Miss Hughes got good money from her settlement. In the letter, she thanks Ashley for fighting for her, and says the episode's title, Our Excellence is Everywhere. At school, Will shows up late on his first day back after suspension, and the school announces the nominees for the Founders Award, which include Carlton, his old friend Connor, and much to everyone's surprise, Will, who has also been nominated. Turns out the BSU were the ones that nominated Will. Lisa congratulates them both, but Will has a favor to ask her, and they separate. Carlton feels slighted by the BSU, especially Yasmin. She says it's nothing personal, but it definitely felt like that. Back to Will and Lisa, he is asking her to teach him how to swim because he doesn't want to get clowned when he goes to practice at Zenith. Lisa says she's done with Drew, and Will does an undeserved I told you so, but realizes that it's not his place to say. But she does still agree to help. Over at Hillary's influencer house, Monica, one of the members of the house, is complaining about another influencer party they missed and remarks how Kylo used to always get them in. Hillary is sitting right there and says this Simply Spike deal she's trying to close is going to help them take off, which Monica says that she's been saying that since last week. Kind of a meta joke because she was saying that in last week's episode. And then she notes things would go faster if they could count on Ivy's followers. But Hillary tells her to trust in her and that she'll get them the followers they need. Next, Tyler congratulates Will on the nomination and welcomes him back to school, but also apologizes for Will getting kicked off and says he tried to plead with Coach to let him back on, but Will says that he's with Zenith now, and Tyler has heard of them and says he loves seeing their highlight reels. Will lies and says he's killing it at Zenith, and Tyler is happy for him. Back in his office, Phil has been running the numbers for his firm, and they're down 30% because they lost their biggest client, Garrison Construction, and Jeffrey advises him to sit down with the CEO, which Phil notes if they manage to get back Garrison Constructions, it would calm down the partners and maybe put a pause on all the merger talk. Back at school, Connor comes to congratulate Carlton, but says he won't win. Carlton thinks that means he'll lose to him, but Connor says that thanks to Will also being nominated, they'll both lose because of that stunt he pulled during the protest. Connor says he knows Carlton and knows that he's probably spiraling inside right now and tosses a baggie in front of him, and he says that it's a peace offering to calm Carlton's nerves, which Carlton covers up quickly and runs to the bathroom to dispose of it. We then get a flashback of Season 1 Carlton because he used to party hard, and this version of Carlton is wondering what he'll do next. In the next scene, Uncle Phil is at a restaurant and orders his usual for him and who he's having lunch with, but his former client doesn't show, and he runs into a former rival and possibly love interest who informs him that his client isn't coming because he's her client now. Aunt Viv is showing Janice from the Lehman Foundation some of the work that will be presented in the show and the layout that she's divided for the show. Janice says she likes it, but she has a couple thoughts, and a couple thoughts turn into a lot of thoughts, which irritates Viv quite a lot. Back at the restaurant, Phil and Erica, the former rival / love interest that stole his client, are talking. She apologizes for poaching his client and notes that she wouldn't have done it if he were still at his firm, to which he remarks back she couldn't have done it if he was still there. But then the conversation veers onto personal relationships. He talks about that he's happily married with Viv and that she's working on her art again, but Erica has 2 failed marriages, no kids, but a kick-ass job, and remarks maybe she just didn't choose the right man, potentially alluding to her and Phil's past relationship. She then says there is one thing Phil can do to get his client back, and then we cut to the next scene abruptly. Will is in his swimming lessons with Lisa and having a hard time adjusting to floating. And I gotta say, I was practically the same way in my college swimming class. He says her voice is the only thing that's bringing him peace right now, so she tells him to close his eyes and focus on her voice, and tells him that the water will carry him if he lets it. And all the while she's talking to him, she actually did the whole parent bicycle trick where she lets go and shows him that he was floating on his own the entire time. In the next scene, we cut to Viv telling Hillary that she doesn't have time to hear about her work drama, but gives in anyway. Hillary says that maybe she should give in and find another sponsor that Ivy can work with just so that they can use her 10 million followers. But Viv tells her to keep going and that the others will take her seriously if she can close this deal without Ivy. Viv tells Hillary to trust her gut. Hillary then asks for invites to her event, and Viv pretends not to know but gives in to Hillary anyway, which Hillary also throws Viv's own advice back at her on how she should make the art show her own instead of listening to Janice. Back at the pool, Lisa clowns Will for needing a break and splashes him, which motivates him to dive in and swim all the way over to her on his own. Once he realizes, they hug but get a little too close. Back in the house, Viv and Lisa are in the studio congratulating Lisa on teaching Will how to swim, but also Viv's new work in making the art show how she wants it. Viv then says the theme is excellence everywhere, inspired by Ashley, to show her her own art and new artists. And Lisa, who is still Viv's assistant, is helping her out by mocking up a new program. She tells Viv about Carlton and Will's nomination for the Founders Award since the boys didn't, but also accidentally tells her about Carlton's panic attack at the protest. Will goes to talk to Carlton while he's working out and asks him what Connor was telling him about, but Carlton reassures Will he isn't falling back into bad habits. But that season 2 trailer I broke down a while ago would beg to differ. In the next scene, Uncle Phil gets home late after his impromptu meeting, but Viv needs to talk about Carlton's protest panic attack and how Will knew all about it and she was waiting on him to come up with a game plan. Their game plan is they decide to divide and conquer. Phil talks to Will and Viv talks to Carlton. Viv goes to Carlton and congratulates him, but then reveals she knows about the panic attack. Phil admits he put Will in a difficult position. Will says he thought he was helping Carlton, but realized he may have pushed him too far. Carlton says he didn't want them to freak out. He shouldn't have hid it from them, but even his doctor says that he'll have good days and bad days. Phil notes Carlton sees Will as a role model. Will's success pushes Carlton to want to succeed as well. But the Founders Award, to which Will says he didn't ask for. Aunt Viv says she doesn't want this to overshadow his nomination, and he just wants to focus on that. And Will says he doesn't care about the Founders Award, and that AAU is his main focus. To which Phil notes if he's not serious about it, it does mean a lot to Carlton, which Will says he'll take himself out the race. Both Will and Carlton tell Phil and Viv not to worry, but Carlton's face is concerning. Next, we get to the day of the art show. And at the art show, Lisa gives Viv a glass and says the show is doing better than good, before she bows away after seeing Janice coming, which notes the layout is different than what they discussed, but Jeffrey comes as a welcome distraction and savior. Monica and Fanta are at the event, and Hillary is recommending they get enough exposure as possible, but they note this isn't the typical type of event that gives many influencers exposures, and Hillary reveals she has a plan for that. Viv thanks Doc for giving Will a spot on his team, and he says not a problem, and also thanks Viv for letting Jackie perform, which Viv notes she wanted a performative aspect at her show anyway. Lisa shows the dancers to their dressing room, and Jackie and Lisa meet for the first time, and the two hit it off. Can't imagine it goes well when they find out who they have in common. Will goes and talks to Doc before he leaves, and Doc tells him not to let the other players get in his head, and tells Will his academics are important, and his school will open up more doors than the other players have. And Will then boasts about the Founders Award, which he wasn't interested in a few scenes ago. Oh boy, here we go with West Philly Will. Doc tells him not to count himself out with that award because D1 schools are looking for leaders, which he believes Will is. Ashley's eye is then caught by a poetry book written by a former enslaved woman. And the excellence is everywhere quote is spoken once again by Aunt Viv. Jeffrey and Phil get a photo together, and he informs Jeffrey of how the lunch went with Erica Baker, that she's back in LA, and if his firm wants Garrison back, he'd have to go join her firm as a senior partner. Jeffrey then asks Phil if he spoke to Viv about it, but says there's nothing to say just yet. We then see Carlton and Jazz are playing the game where you make up backstories for random people in a crowd. And the one Jazz picks turns out to be Hillary's ex, LaMarcus Alton, who is a favorite player of Jazz's and is even on his fantasy team. Viv is giving her speech about how she wants to create a space for emerging artists, which includes dance just to introduce Jackie's dance group, which is a fusion of tap and hip-hop. Jazz is eyeing Hillary with her ex, Uncle Phil spots Jeffrey leaving, and Will is keeping his eyes on Jackie. After the performance, Jazz grills Hillary on her ex, including why they broke up, which Hillary attributes to long distance, and Jazz feels a little salty she invited him there. It can't feel good when practically her whole family still seems to love LaMarcus. Lisa congratulates Jackie and friends on their performance, and Jackie thanks her for her encouragement before the show. And Will comes and ruins the moment when Lisa realizes that Will and Jackie are together, and Jackie realizes he and Lisa used to be together, and Lisa still isn't over him. After the event, Will goes to talk to Lisa about Jackie, but Lisa is heartbroken and says they can't be friends anymore. Phil tells Viv how proud he is of her and tells her not to forget her own voice. But he also says that they have a problem with Jeffrey. Back at the influencer house, Hillary's stunt with LaMarcus actually paid off for the house, as she closed the Simply Spike deal, but it has caused apparent problems in her relationship with Jazz. But back with Phil and Viv, he caught Jeffrey breaking into his office on his security camera and says Jeffrey is looking for his son Frederick, something they both know can't happen. In the final scene, Carlton and Will's scenes run parallel to each other. They both go into their bags, but while Will pulls out his laptop to look at the Founders Award, Carlton pulls out the baggie he acted like he flushed, and he threw it in his underwear drawer and then stares the camera down as it pans out. End of episode. Okay, what another great episode for Bel-Air. This show always keeps me entertained. This episode is titled Excellence is Everywhere, a title that is spoken 3 times in this episode, noting that black excellence is all around us, even if not always blasted on a megaphone or a cell phone. A couple thoughts I had on this episode. 2 characters who I don't know where their stories are going is Aunt Viv and Ashley, considering that it feels like both their storylines got wrapped up in this one episode. The season 2 trailer kind of ruined Carlton's story, because if you watch, they practically told us he was going to relapse. And that kind of just ruins the suspense of this episode, because you kind of figured he wasn't going to throw away the baggie. Will, apparently, is now the privileged one at AAU, which he isn't used to. But he couldn't swim, but basically learns in one day because he has 24/7 access to a pool. Free, I might add. Doc actually seems like a good influence on Will in this episode, telling him his academics are important and not just basketball. A funny thing to note is that Jackie's dance group dances to the song Icon by Jaden Smith, son of Will Smith. So apparently Jaden Smith exists in the Bel-Air universe. They also called back Lisa being Aunt Viv's assistant, even though it kind of starts and ends in this episode. LaMarcus Alton was the only ex that Hillary name-dropped, so of course he was going to show up, and he seems to be a romantic foil for Jazz. One thing that was weird is that the scene with Hillary and Viv in the studio starts abruptly, like it was edited to start sooner than it did, but just came off weird when the episode went through. Okay, everyone, that's all I've got for today. What did you think about the episode? Let me know in the comments. See you next week for another breakdown and review for the next episode of Bel-Air, and see you next time on the Critic-Verse.